Welcome to the Anew Narrative podcast, where we discuss all things health and human design. I'm Sam Zagar, your projector guide and host. This is a show about deconditioning. My goal is to confront our conditioned, not-self narratives so that we can write them anew through the lens of our true selves. It's through this process that I hope to guide you to your signature life. Okay, and welcome to Anew Narrative. It's not a new podcast, but it's a new kind of episode, and I definitely hope to do a lot more of these in the future. I've been swinging more in the direction of health lately, and diet, aka determination, is something that's really interesting to me. Now, of the 12 variations of determination, I believe that one of them has it significantly harder than everybody else. So I thought we'd kick it off with a challenge, and maybe I can offer a little bit of guidance on how to get you guys through this. And I'm not really going to provide anything. I'm going to ask questions, and I'm going to hope that my guests have something to provide. Now, guests plural is also something very new for me. We've got two people. We have Laura and we have Stevie. Now, Laura is a generator. She has 3 channels. One is collective, 2 are individual, and that's definitely going to contribute to the conversation that we're having. Her variable is a crossover. She is design, right, left, and personality, left, right, which means that she has a strategic mind. Whereas Stevie is a 2-channel generator. One is individual and one is tribal, and she is quad right in her variable. So all variable arrows point in the right direction, which means she has a receptive mind. All of this is relevant to our conversation. So welcome, Laura, and welcome, Stevie.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello, hello. Now, I want to get a little bit of information from both of you so that the listener can either relate to you or not relate to you. I think both are valuable. So you both are mothers, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay,
Yep.
now, Laura, what are you raising?
I am raising 4/6 manifesting generator, and she's single deaf, very, very tribal, and she's my oldest. And then my youngest is a 5/1 manifester. She's a split definition, and I bridge her split. So that's super fun for both of us. And yeah, those are my little family.
Okay, Stevie, what are you raising?
I am raising a 5/2 manifester. Lucky me.
Now, are all of your kids in school? All kids in school? Yes, nobody's young enough to be at home?
Yes.
Correct.
Excellent. Okay, so both of you have indirect light determination. So of the 6 main types of determination, and then each main type has basically 2 directions it can go in. Y'all are at the end of the evolutionary spectrum, as in you are the newest type and you are referred to as the most sensitive. Now, this is in contrast to myself. I would technically be number 1 and you would be number 12. I would be the original, most ancient primal type and not really sensitive, certainly not sensitive in the way that you are. I am ingredient specific, you are circumstance specific. So being indirect light determination, I mean, it sounds relatively obvious what it is, and you can glean some pretty basic information about it. You're supposed to be out of the light when you are consuming food, when you're feeding your brain. Now, unless both of you are night shift workers that don't have to take care of either people or anybody else, you know, that's not going to be easy for you. So, Laura, will you tell me a little bit about what it feels? Let's not overload the question too much in the beginning. What does it feel like to have indirect light determination? Let's start there.
It feels like not as bad, I think, as my mind wanted to make it in the beginning. So when I first, human design first found me and I found out I was indirect, it made a lot of things from my life make a lot of sense. So it really, really clicked. I always felt nocturnal. I always wanted to eat at night and felt guilty about it. Always, tried to force myself to follow the sort of standard healthy diet, and it never felt good. It didn't work for me. And I felt sick a lot and tired a lot and mentally unwell. So when the information first came to me, determination was what I was most drawn to, because it was like, that's something that is going to have a big impact. I just had a feeling it was a big thing in my design. And I, of course, approached it quite mentally in the beginning and made myself rules to follow and,
Yep.
tried to be a good little indirect human, whatever that is, realizing that, I kind of threw the rule book out, and I just eventually had to go back to eating intuitively, and what that meant to not prescribe it, to have it just come from my body and come naturally. And a big part of it is not just when we eat, it's also when we sleep, and the timing of our energy, and when we feel like we have the most to give, and when we can kind of go into more of a rest mode. And eventually I don't know, I kind of like being like a secret little vampire. But there's nothing about it that makes me wish that I was any different. I kind of love, I see it as, and at least like we have a wood electric furnace here. And even back in the day, someone needed to stay up overnight and keep the fire going. And that metaphor really sticks with me when I'm sitting down by the fire at night by myself in the dark with just the heat and just that light. And that's how I see myself often. I'm keeping the fire going overnight while the the daylighters are resting. So.
And you listed a few things there that I could hear as like, the mental block or the conditioned narrative about why you're not supposed to be this way. Before anybody tells you you're indirect, you have these habits or behaviors that other people see and they go, that's not healthy for you. Like, don't eat right before you go to bed, or don't eat late at night, or fast for a few hours before you go to sleep. But intuitively you go, that's not what actually feels good for me. So then it starts this mental kind of like mistrust of, do I trust what my body is saying, or do I trust these health authorities, whatever they are? Who is giving us this advice? Who says that this is best for us? And then I also have the question of like, but who does this really apply to? Because there's always a question of who does this information work for, and what makes that person be the thing that works for them? Because before human design, I looked at statistics very, very differently. I thought statistics were a real thing. It was like people are like this, or, and then they have to define people. Well, women are like this, or this race is like this, or this religion is like, it's like, or this age is like this. And I'm like, no, there are certain things where it just doesn't work across the board like that. What was the hardest of those conditioned beliefs to break out of and be like, fuck this, or sorry, whoops, I'm gonna trust my body?
I have a long history of disordered eating. I was in a lot of really intense dance classes growing up at a time when my body was changing, and it changed way faster than my mind could keep up with. And I always had a very strong idea of what my body should look like. It's all like, those mental things, it's always the should. So I should eat this in order to look like this, because this is how everyone expects I should look as a dancer or as a performer. And only after I started eating as like indirectly, really letting go of the shoulds, was I able to feel like comfortable with my body and not. So I think a lot of it was about stripping away what I should eat in order to look a certain way, and that I needed to look a certain way. There was a sort of like, oh, forget it. It's not none of that is real anymore. It doesn't feel real to me. It doesn't feel like something that I need to care about. That was all a part of the sort of mind game that I was playing with myself.
There are a couple things that really stood out there. We tend to eat because of how we think we're supposed to look. Now, when people transition into human design, they're going to carry that with them. When we say that there are determinations, and we, especially if we refer to them at diet type, if they hear diet before they hear determination, diet implies one kind of thing, and we'll attach it usually more than anything to some type of restricted way. Whereas determination, I love the word determination because it doesn't make sense in terms of diet, but it makes sense in terms of what it's acknowledging. How you feed the brain determines your ability to activate or use your cognition. Determination. Will you actually get to the place you're trying to go? And when we're marketing, your determination is the way to feed yourself, we have to pull back that conditioning that says, and it's not about changing how you look. It's about changing how your brain operates. This is the way to feed yourself so that you're not stupid. It's got nothing to do with being attractive. It's got to do with your body not being dumb.
Mm-hmm.
In a way, I'm like, yeah, that should be easy to market to people. It's not. It's not. So we have this, human design is for the kids. We hope to be able to raise our kids according to what their design is, and also without forcing it on them, right? How do you raise them according to something that we still want them to be their own authority in? Like, I got to ask Maven, do you want to eat this or this? And hope that he naturally orients towards what presents as hot thirst. What has moving through your beginning deconditioning helped you in terms of how you condition your kids around their determination?
Ooh. Well, I've been blessed with both of my children are also 6 color. So Kaya, my oldest, is indirect, and Lyndon, my youngest, is direct. So we have a pretty funny little sort of lack of structure
Yeah.
that is, and it's funny because I will ask the generator questions. I'll ask the manifestor, or I'll inform the manifestor. And so it's again about acknowledging that they're different. They may not feel different. They may not understand that yet, but just, if I'm offering one nighttime snacks, a manifestor decides that that's what she also wants, then we can end up having some discussions at night about, when your body's hungry, when you really feel like you need to eat, or could you have eaten earlier? What can we have right now? So we have there's a lot of a lot of gentleness when it approaches what you eat and how much you eat, and if you finish it and if you don't finish it. And it's really about eat when you're hungry. I just want, if your body is hungry, feed it.
So it
And
sounds
that's
like
what's
you're teaching them to trust your body so they don't have to go through that debate of which one of these should I listen to.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean, always if little manifestor wants a snack, I'm not going to necessarily say no. It's, why don't we try some applesauce? Something, just coming up with things that might be a little easier to digest, a little more gentle. There's a lot of, for me, I've discovered certain things are a little bit easier in the daytime. Certain things are not as easy. So I would believe then that would be the same for them, and that it's up to them to sort of play around and discover, and they can change their minds. And it's all sort of, so I'm very sort of, it's a judgment free. I had to pull that judgment that, big part of my brain with my conscious sun in 18 and 1858 and my definition and my cross. I can be the judgiest worst. And I was the super judgy, horrible. And it mostly was towards myself and how I thought, again, we had chatted before the call started about it can feel like failing. I was like, I'm doing it all wrong. And now where I guess my mind is maybe cool is yeah, I'm doing it wrong. I'm glad. It feels good to just buck the rules and listen to what my body is telling me. And then also look at my kids and give them permission to do the same.
Okay, now, Stevie, can you relate to what Laura's sharing?
I can. However, from a very early age, human design, I kind of found on a whim, but I kind of got hooked because it finally explained how I already felt and how I already lived. And I feel like a lot of people don't see human design through that lens. So I was hooked from the beginning because I, as an early aged child, already was fully living my indirect life. I innately was only drinking like liquids in the morning and I didn't want to actually eat. Um, and then I got a lot of kickback
Mm-hmm.
early on for that. And I stood my ground so hard, as hard as I could.
Mm-hmm.
And it was always, I gravitated towards liquids, broths, light soups for breakfast. And I got made fun of all the time for it. And my little generator self was like, I don't care. I'm doing this. I want my black coffee and I want my chicken noodle soup. And I'm going to eat it when I want to. And no one's going to put a time limit on me as to when, that's a lunch food. So you can't have it yet. Um, Unfortunately, I grew up in a very disordered household when it came to food and habits of that caliber. So it was kind of a double whammy for me because I had two parents that were like, you have to eat this way
Mm-hmm.
because that's the way we decide. And I have to go against the whole trend of being indirect, where it's like, I don't even want to eat till 6 or 7 at night, like my heavy foods. And everything in the world goes against that, where you shouldn't eat after 8 and you shouldn't eat for 12 hours and you need to eat first thing. Make sure you eat your protein and make sure you eat in this specific order. And I could never do that. It gave me internal grief from
Mm-hmm.
an early age. So
Okay.
I fully relate from a different lens.
Now, if the parents were the bigger block in the beginning stages of life, now is your role of being the parent the block at this stage of life? Like, if it weren't for being a mom, you would be able to tweak your schedule more extreme?
Correct.
Are you hoping that when your child is no longer going to school or can take themselves to school, you'll make some adjustments?
That is my dream, my ultimate life goal. Yes.
What does your partner think about this?
Well, he's direct light, so
What?
we're polar opposites, and it is extremely tough to live in this household of mine. Yep.
Hey, you go out to dates and like one of you has an entree, the other one's just having drinks.
Well, that's part of my problem. I'm feelings cognition as well, and I'm a fourth line and I love going out with my people. I love going out. I'm dry kitchens environment. I want to see my people out and about. And a lot of times that it revolves around food a lot, which
Mhm.
I love food. However, I can't physically take in food even if it's during dark hours, if I have bright lights around me, if it's loud, if the feeling is off. So I'm down to just drinking liquids, even in darker hours. Um, so that's another nuance for me.
Okay, so both of you have the passive brain if it's indirect, and the passive brain always is less calorie than the active brain. Lower calories, more ability to fast, but how can you tell when you've pushed it too far? When you just have not had enough calories, enough, what happens when you start to crash?
I physically get symptoms. I feel dizzy. I feel weak. I lose my breath. It's very hard for me to talk. Like
You lose your voice.
yes, I physically have to push words out. Um, but mainly I get very shaky and dizzy and weak.
Okay, now, Laura, do you feel any differently, or is that fairly accurate for you?
It's accurate, but I would also add that I have a lot more trouble processing emotions that way. I'm an open emotional, and the pattern is that if I'm not eating enough, or in times when I would overeat for whatever reason during the daytime, it's like the processing capacity isn't there. And the emotions tend to be the thing that can like come in and make or break the moment, if you will.
Ooh, that I because well, y'all are very different from me. You're both non-emotional, so I immediately wondered if that applied to both of you. But even I could relate a little bit to that in if if I am hungry, if I haven't had enough calories that day, my ability to handle solar plexus deconditioning is gone. Like you look at me and I'll probably cry. So I'm probably not going to handle the conversation very well. Okay, interesting. Now, I'm a little bit curious. Let's go to Laura for this one. What have you seen for content in the human design world about indirect light determination that is either helpful or not accurate at all? What kind of information's out there and how do you feel about it?
Ooh. I can't speak to what's out there at the moment because I've done a fairly strong sort of internet social media, not, I wouldn't say cleanse, but I've been giving less attention to it and very more specifically to just like people that I feel close with, as opposed to like taking in extra information. But I do remember in the early stages, I just, I mean, it was like, don't eat after sundown, eat in the shade. There were all of these very specific things to follow. And I don't necessarily want to eat outside at all if I don't have to. Like I don't, and eat in low lighting. I will eat in the dark happily. So I think that a lot of the information it tries and it maybe hits on points that work for some people, but I don't know that there's a way to eat universally, right? And it's going to be so dependent um on the individual. So yeah, I think there's some people who swear by waking up in the morning to eat too. Like they eat at sunrise. So, when I hear like sleep on your food, does it matter if you sleep on your food if it's sunny outside and it's very, very dark in your room and you're black outside? There's so many different sort of things that could come up that could either work or not work for someone. So, yeah, I
When I
think
think
like,
of,
yeah,
oh,
just
go
not
ahead.
taking the things too literally, the rules that you see.
Yes, agreed. I definitely had my own struggles with that. I think the worst phrase that I came across, and I don't feel this way anymore, but the worst phrase for reactivity for me was Raw saying, if you want salt, put salt on your tongue. And it made me livid to read that as a consecutive person because to me, salt wasn't food. Like it was flavoring. It was a nutrient. It's a mineral. So it felt so reductionist to me in that I was like, why would I ever eat again? I'll just go buy B vitamins if I need them, right? Like what do I need food for? Just give me all the specific nutrients, like I could really reduce this further. Do I have to like fully eliminate everything I eat before I take another bite of a different kind of food and swallow it? What if they mix together inside me? Like as we discussed before we started recording, there are so many ways that you can think that you're failing at this. Okay, so if we think that we're failing according to the rules or guidelines that we follow, how would we actually identify that we're failing at this? And not like nobody's a failure. Like truly, if you failed at indirect light determination, how would we know? What would it feel like? Now, my assumption off the bat is you have a passive brain. So failing at that is going to feel like you're pushing it too hard. You're trying to make it perform too much. You're overfilling it with calories. You're not processing things. Um, you would have brain fog extremely, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we, and because I think that like the sign of failure is usually like, yo, pivot. Like it gets your attention to get you to change the behavior a little bit. So what are the signs where you're like, I'm gonna tighten this up a little bit. I'm gonna dial this in, whatever that is for you. Laura, will you go first?
Sure. I get rashes. I found last year very specifically that I would get rashes from eating certain foods in the daytime. So I don't find myself reaching for those. But I had it in my mind, quantity wise, I could have this little bit and I'll be fine. But then the pattern was that it was not fine. And I had, for a couple of months, I just didn't want to go, I didn't want anyone to see me because I had a very, very thorough rash. And even now, I can feel the food sit in my stomach. I can feel it. Sometimes I feel hungry before sundown. And I know if I'm eating then that the food is going to sit for a bit and then it'll start digesting. It's almost like I can feel it turn on. You don't need to tell me when the sun physically sets. It's like a swell. There's an inner acknowledgement of like, it's our time, we're turning on now. So I can just feel that. And it's wild to me that I don't stop myself from eating a little before it now, because then I just hang out and I read or do something pretty chill while I'm waiting for the big digestion to sort of begin. So
The sunset's like preheating the oven for you.
yeah.
And Stevie, you clearly had like you were nodding in agreement. So this is true.
My body is like, it's go time, baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it knows. I could be in a room without windows. It's just when I can, as a generator, I feel the motor revving up, like, okay, we're almost there. Let's go. Let's do this. Like
Oh,
the dam is unleashed.
what I felt there was how it must be incredibly frustrating for both of you to know that there's a point in the day at which you turn on, you function very well, you perform very well, like but people don't get to experience this version of you very often. So other people's projections on you, assumptions of you, thoughts about how you perform or live your life or show up is not accurate.
I've been called lazy my entire life from a very early age because people see me in direct light and I don't want to move. I don't want to eat. I don't want to do my thinking. I just want to be myself. And I really lean into like, honestly, my strategy, my authority, and my feelings cognition the most during daylight hours. Do I want to do this in this space? Is the feeling fine during daylight hours? So people see me very low energy, and I do have brain fog a lot during the day. It's very hard for me to function. Nighttime, I feel the motor revving up, and I'm like, let's do this. Like I get this weird burst of energy, and it doesn't matter if I've had 4 hours of sleep or 12 hours of sleep. It's go time.
Okay, I really appreciate the nuance of this conversation because so many people, when they're just looking at your type, there's an assumption about the energy that's available consistently or how it looks. Like, I think people expect that generators present as like very athletic, fit people that are always like, go, 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 and they're happy to just keep going. And it's like, no. Whereas also, like, you can have projectors like me. I present as very, very, very active, even though I'm technically a non-energy type because I'm all left and I have a motor. Like, it's not accurate for us to just be like, this one has energy, point blank. This one doesn't. It's like, it does really show up very differently. For the most part, especially as a quad right generator, you're going to present as a lot more chill than people are going to expect a generator to present. But you just acknowledged there are moments, there's in fact a specific moment where you consistently get a wind, a hit of energy. You perk up. Now, what I'm curious about is what do you actually want to use that energy for?
It's my life question. I don't know, honestly. For me specifically, I get all of my great ideas and my epiphanies during nighttime hours. I'm extra thirsty in the evening. Like, I don't even want to take in my hydration till the sun goes down. I won't be thirsty, and then suddenly it'll hit me, and I'm so thirsty. I could chug a gallon of water. It'll be midnight, and I'm like, okay, here we go. I feel it coming, and that's when my hydration kicks in. So everything that just a regular Google search would tell you, stay hydrated, my hydration isn't even in my scope of being until it's nighttime out, which I find fascinating. I don't know how to use my energy at night unless I'm a third shift worker, honestly, but that goes against everything I need to do to take care of my kid during daylight hours.
Mm-hmm. Well,
which is the biggest conundrum.
I have a lot of, I don't know what the right word is. I'm like, I think it would have really sucked going through school for both of you. Because if you got brain fog all day and you're presenting as what the teacher is going to see as like more lethargic or it's lazy, and you're slow to move or slow to answer the questions, people are going to assume a lot of things about your intelligence that is not accurate. And so I'm wondering, like, if there was night school as young as kindergarten, do you think that there are people that would send their kids to that? Do you think that there are kids that would advocate for that? Would you send your kids if it was relevant?
I would, knowing how I had to go through just a regular school system. I was selectively mute in elementary school.
Really?
Because I refused to speak, I refused to respond, and I refused to engage because I didn't want to.
Damn.
I was pretty hardcore as a kid.
And it's not coming from willpower, which is even cooler.
I love that. I was the exact opposite, like with driving and pushing with willpower that I didn't have. So I overachieved in school. I had like a bare minimum that I would not allow myself to go under in terms of marks. And I pushed really, really hard. And I did really well in school. So to outsiders, I got a lot of praise, but mentally I was very, very unwell. And no matter how well I did, I never felt like I did well. It was that sort of really bad cycle of needing feedback that was never actually going to land because I didn't feel good about myself. So constantly pulling up from a well of willpower that just didn't exist in me made me really dislike myself for a long, long time.
And you mentioned in the beginning that one of your kids is in direct flight, right?
Mm-hmm.
What point are they at in school?
She's in grade 5. She just started like middle school, and she really likes it. For when we moved into town a couple years ago, it was a big adjustment for her. She's a 4-6, so it was kind of traumatic.
Yeah.
And that whole year, it was like, do you want to go today? Nope. You want to stay home with me? Cool. And so, and her school was really wonderful and accommodating, and we didn't push her. She wanted to sleep in. She, sort of, she's not like behind in any way in school. And there was nothing as a red flag that was thrown up from outsiders. So we were able to sort of really be protective of her. And, but if there was a night school option, I would love for her to try that. I think that would be really cool. Even just having different hours, wouldn't necessarily have to be at night, but like, can we just skip mornings altogether? That's, just fast forward, that first 4 hours when everyone else is all gung ho, when I'm not functional yet. So, and the conversation, it may come, she may decide that she doesn't want to do that and go through schooling with those hours. And then we would probably chat about homeschool if that's an option,
Mhm.
because I work from home. So I have a lot more flexibility in that way, and I feel very lucky for it, actually.
Okay, now I'm curious. I'm not entirely sure how I want to word this, but we say strategy and authority comes before determination. You have to use strategy and authority to get into determination. I laugh when Ross says, maybe it's never correct for you. The irony that it's correct to be what our determination is, but it also may be correct to never engage with that if it never presents in the correct way. Sometimes this is such a fucking riddle. I can understand why people get a little confused or irritated with some of it. So, strategy and authority. For both of you today, it's going to be a pure sacral way to respond. So, we're going to help the listener the most with those kinds of mechanics from personal experience. But waiting to respond and actually having the response, there is a precursor to that too. You have to actually think that you can be your own authority. You have to have some level of boundary or belief in yourself or self-respect. So if somebody finds out that they are indirect light determination and they hear, I got to get there through strategy and authority, what what do you have from personal experience that would be helpful for this person in some way? What can you share?
What would I share? Um, the While you're learning to trust yourself, you may feel like you're doing it wrong, and that's okay. And I think having a lot of self-forgiveness and sort of that acceptance of I'm going to play and not following anything ridiculously rigid at first, sort of letting, like, there's that overarching limitation of light and timing, but there's so much within that to play around with. So being able to find your own sort of personal limitation and what feels good, and taking that time and not rushing it. And I would say, again, it's about eating when you're hungry. And naturally, when, yeah, I find that I'm never hungry during the daytime. Like I'm never hungry during the daytime. I will drink, coffee, or I will drink things. That's what I want. So it's about, when do you feel hungry and what do you feel like eating then? And I think our cognition hopefully also helps too once that determination settles in and gives feedback. Because if I don't want to if I don't want to hold something, if I'm not drawn to picking it up, if I don't respond to wanting to touch it in any way, then I know it's not something that I'm meant to eat. And there's no shoulds. Like, and also, it's okay if other people are uncomfortable with eating differently. I mean, I still go for, lunch dates with my friends, and I order soup, or I get a plate of something, and I'll have a couple bites and I'll take the rest to go. And it's not that I stop myself from doing things. I can just change how I do them, and make adjustments that way too.
Honestly, one of the things that you started that with was so direct and so simple and so helpful. And it was the question, are you hungry? Like if your part of your strategy is way to respond and you have your pure response in the moment as your authority, and we say, you're going to play with this information through strategy and authority, one of the first questions to ask is, are you hungry? Because if the person says no, it doesn't really matter whether it's light or dark out. You don't need to be eaten anyway, right? Like the body
Exactly.
said no, so we don't need to think about it beyond that. And then you also acknowledged how your cognition is supporting your process. And there are some people who are inaccurately sharing that cognition is authority. It is not from a source-based place. However, I believe that cognition can be used to validate what the authority is saying. So I don't think it's like, I want to touch that necessarily means I'm having a response to that, but I don't want to touch that, I'm pretty sure is validating that's a no for me. I think the no is more validated by the cognition. So, okay, a few definable practical ways to apply that. Thank you. Now, Stevie, similar for you, but in a funny way, I'm like, you came out so hot out the gate, right? Like there's an aspect of you where this is clearly like a defined characteristic in who you are. You're more, I am what I am. Not that that necessarily makes it easier for you, but if other people don't have that quality, what I think more curious to hear from you is how do you talk yourself out of it when you start to tell yourself you're a failure? Because when we talked about that just before we hit record, I feel that very much just as a third line profile, right? We're always failing, failing, failing at everything. And when you come into human design, I think there's a lot of external pressure to be good at this, to perfect it, to be like, the best little design student, because if you're not, you're going to get called out for doing it wrong and being an idiot. So, what happens when you think that you're failing? Are you ever actually failing? How can you tell? How do you talk yourself out of it?
That's a great question. A lot of times I look at my decision making as a circle, not really like a hierarchy or a triangle. So I use my strategy and authority, but I rely heavily on my feelings cognition as well. And it's kind of like a connect the dots sort of style for me. So if I feel like I'm failing, it's like, I don't know. A large part of me, I take a lot of my life in jest, as in, wow, that didn't turn out how I thought, or look what happened now. How
Hmm.
am I going to get out of this? I don't rarely see my life through a lens of failing in that, look what I did, it didn't work out, this is terrible. It's more like, well, that was weird.
Hmm.
And I do rely on kind of like a circle of what's my strategy, what's my authority saying, how do I feel in this moment? Am I getting a good feeling? Am I getting a stop feeling? Am I getting a hold feeling, like a pause feeling? Um, and how does my actual body feel in the moment as well? And I kind of rely on those categories or those criterias to help me make a decision. Even if I feel like I failed, it was like, well, I said yes to it. My feeling, there was no specific feeling. So I went with it, and wow, that didn't work out. um, but to the outside world, it does, I do feel like I get the sharp eye of me failing and that judgment that comes with it. Um, but at the end of the day, I've always relied strongly on kind of my decision process. And so far, it hasn't failed me.
Now, Laura touched on her experience with disordered eating. And one of the things that I was wondering is because both of your determinations present as you don't eat much throughout the day, do you find that people assume or make comments to you to inquire if you have an eating disorder?
No, not specifically the eating disorder for me, but I do get comments a lot like, why aren't you eating your food? Is your food terrible? Especially when I go out with friends. It's like, why aren't you eating? Why didn't you order anything? Why did you just order that? And it's like, I want to be here and talk to you and have, conversation, but I'm not here to actually eat the food. It
Right.
feels terrible to eat that food. And like Laura mentioned, I'll take a few bites and then I'll either take it to go or I'll just leave it at the restaurant. And I kind of chalk that up to like part of the cost of being indirect. Like maybe my meal was $25 and taking 3 bites is the cost of being an indirect person. But
Okay.
I do get comments where it's like, well, do you not like your food?
Yeah.
It's fine. I don't want to eat it though. 3 bites is plenty.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, I'm gonna end on, I think, just a lighter question. Being indirect, w- I imagine that it would feel the best to live in a place where the sun's not out as much, where we have a lot of either winter hours or darkness hours, or maybe we're not too close to the equator, but again, these are my assumptions. Is there some type of like dream location or a place you feel like you have to go before you die? Or like, God, if I wasn't married, I'd like, do you have a spot that you think that you'd feel really good in?
Yes, at some point in my life, would love to experience those places where you can go and the sun doesn't rise. And I have Swedish ancestry too, so it would be like almost like going back home in some ways. But like the thought of being able to live there for a bit, or even go and visit during that darkness, very, very much excites me. But I live pretty far north as it is, so we have the extreme of the really long nights in winter versus, I mean, the sun sets at 11 p.m. almost. Not quite, but it's still bright at 11 p.m. in the peak of summer. So there's it's kind of a life of extremes, and
Yeah.
I don't think I'd have it any other way. I don't know. This is where this is where I found myself, and I like the challenge.
All right. Stevie, where are you going? Anywhere?
I'm conflicted. I used to live in the Virgin Islands, and that was my dream location, and I lived it, and it was fantastic. Absolutely loved it. Give me the heat, give me the bright sun, give me the dark, dark sunglasses though, and a hat. I live in the Midwest right now with a very long winter. It's always gray, it's always cold, and it's my own personal hell. When summer hits and it's nice outside and warm, but it's nighttime and dark, that's a sweet spot for me. Staying up at 2 a.m. just looking outside the window and it's nice, like 80 degrees out. Oof. I'm like, we're sold. Just take me now. I'm there. I'm at my limit.
Does this
But I don't
mean, like,
go
would
ahead.
some of your best memories be like staying out really late as a teenager?
Absolutely. I used to drive around in my car when I was 16. I would leave my house at 11 p.m. and just drive nowhere.
This
Just
sounds
nowhere.
so quad right. It's like you're using that motor, but also it has no purpose or plan really. Like,
It's the best. Just opening a window at 2 a.m. on a summer night, and I hear like the bugs out, but it's quiet. It's heaven, honestly. I'm like, if this is what heaven's like, sold. I'm there. I'm there.
I mean, you kind of leave me on a question of, can we make heaven on earth? Like, what is heaven for each person? I'm not, I mean, I never really share my quote unquote beliefs on here because I'll be honest, I'm not sure I have any. And even if I did, I think they might change pretty consistently with who I am. More awareness, more beliefs, let's say that. But I like the idea that if we were actually allowed to be differentiated, your regular life might feel a little bit more like you get your slice of heaven. Okay, now, Stevie, would you like anybody to know where to find you after this episode?
Nope.
Didn't think so. So cool. I've got an anonymous guest. Stevie's not their real name, but you'll never know what it is. Okay. And Laura, do you want anybody to be able to get in touch with you?
Sure. I'm on Instagram infrequently as indirect.photography. And that's my handle. And I love taking photos, a lot of indirect photos. They tend to be maybe more indirect themed. And so that's a lot of my feed. And then I just do some personal stuff on my stories. So
You take amazing photos, and for that brief stint in time when I tried to start a human design magazine, you were my favorite person to source from.
oh, thank you. And you were the biggest supporter when I got my camera. You were like, that's awesome. I love that. And I was like, oh, so thank you.
It makes me feel good as a tribal person. Okay. I appreciate both of you giving me an hour of your time and sharing your stories, and I'm sure that the audience got some pretty awesome tips there. So I will say goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.